I'm Glenda Carroll. I'm the open water chair for Pacific Master Swimming, and that's in this area. Extraordinaire, right? Yeah, okay. All right. I do it. And we're lucky here. We do a lot of events. This year we have probably about 20. Last year we had about 26. It was like a lot. So the format's going to be exactly the same as next door. I'll be asking the panel questions, and then I'm going to save time so you can ask questions, because your comments and questions are really important to everyone. And I want to go through and have people introduce themselves. Well, let's see. Jim, you've heard this morning. We know him.
Hi, I'm Jim. I'm an aquaholic.
Yeah. Hi. Dave, you heard this morning, and he's from Sonoma, right? Sonoma County. Lisa, you haven't heard.
I know. Oh,
So
God. What, I'm just supposed to introduce myself?
Yeah, just say who you are.
So my name's Lisa Hazen. I've done all these guys' races many times. I also did the pro circuit in the late 90s. So that's how I have a little more experience than what these races, or a little different. I think it's a different experience, but I think it's an experience that can shed some light on some of the problems that could occur. They tend to occur more frequently in longer marathon races. So.
And we have Dave Barra from New York. You want to say a couple things about yourself?
Hi, I'm not a race director, but I've been a frequent participant in many of the events in and around New York City. I am currently planning a 7-day, 120-mile stage swim down the Hudson River that will finish at the Verrazano Bridge. And hopefully it'll go smoothly and we'll turn that into an annual event.
Well, Dave, since you're taking the place of Morty Berger from New York, so I'm going to ask him. You're the first question.
I'll do my best.
Okay. You're planning a new swim, right? Long one. And Hudson River, right? So it's got currents, it's got boating traffic, it's got stuff floating around in it. So what are the different variables you've got to consider to address safety? How are you going to do this?
Boat traffic is a primary concern. The Hudson River is a very active estuary. It flows both ways, so it's not really a river where you can consider the direction of flow being singular. It does move both ways, and as a swimmer, you want to be right out there in the middle, but that's where the boats want to be as well. So you need to plan the course accordingly so that you can take as much advantage of the favorable currents as possible without impeding on boat traffic. The flow of the river is also affected by atmospheric conditions, weather events, and the tides can be delayed for hours at times. So as much planning as it's possible to do prior to the event. You really need to be on the water day of the event and watch its movement and be able to adjust and modify things right down to splash time. So,
let me just ask you another sort of a follow-up. Do you set your start times and how you put your heats together based on currents, tides, things like that?
Well, my event's going to be a small one, so there are only 2 swimmers that we're planning for this year, Rondi Davies and myself. Rondi's a faster swimmer than I am, so the modeling is going to be different for each of us. I may have to start swimming earlier on certain days and start against the flow, just to be able to finish the legs in the allotted time that we have. For New York City events, they often present the swimmers with a wave start from slower to faster, And the idea is to give the slower swimmers a little more time in the water, but also to limit the overall exposure of the event, and try and organize things so that all the swimmers are coming in a very small window, and that that I think creates a favorable relationship with the Coast Guard and the other enforcement agencies. Certainly the commercial traffic appreciates limiting the exposure on the water. And when it all comes together, everybody finishes very close, within a half hour over a 10K, and I think that's a pretty impressive feat. So.
Lisa, this is for you. Lisa's swum all over the world, and I'm just curious. Have you ever done any of the Manhattan swims? Okay. All right. So it's a good question for you. If you were going to go and do one of the swims this year, so you're new to the area, what do you do? How do you find out, what you need to know? So what would a swimmer need to know to do this they've never done it before in a new area?
Well, if I were going to attempt to do something like Manhattan, there's a wealth of knowledge of all the people who have done it prior to me. So I'd contact my friends that I know have done it and pick their brains. Like Shelley said, she prepares her swimmers by first letting them pick her brain. So I would do that in reverse and just gather as much knowledge as I could of the area. I might even, say if you can afford it, take a week, go in advance. Always swim with a boat or swim with a buddy. I can't, I'm very particular about swimming with a buddy as well. So if you can put yourself in the situation, kind of get used to some of the trickier spots, because I know that every around an island race is going to have some tricky spots. The other ones, you can bypass those. But if you can get a feel for it in advance, or if you are lucky enough to live there and can do this a lot, the more prepared you are for a situation, the more able you are to handle the differences day to day, because you're going to deal with tides in something like around Manhattan. Preparing isn't just going to the pool and doing your 50 or however many thousand a week you think you need to prepare physically. It's the mental and the different conditions that you're going to see, because open water is a whole different beast than being in a pool. And I know we all, or the majority of us, have to train in a pool for these events, but the pool just doesn't give you the environmental experience, shall I call it, that you need to handle any situation that could come up. So.
And this is a question for David. He runs a number of swims up here in the Bay Area, some in rivers, some in lakes. And for river swims, are there special types of rescue and safety equipment that are specific to river that you need? Where should your safety personnel be placed? And do they need to have different qualifications for being a guard in a river?
Thank you. So in terms, I guess I'll hit those one at a time if that's all right. Sure. So what types of rescue and safety equipment are preferred in river swims? It's pretty similar to what you'd need in ocean and lake swims. Rescue boards, kayaks if you're going to be using those, rescue tubes. I'd stay away from rescue cans that you might use on a ocean lifeguarded beach. But in general, it depends on the river, depends on the time of year, and it depends on the flow. So if you've got, something hooked up to the ocean, you've got a really big current coming in and out with the tide, you might want people who are swiftwater trained. They're going to be better trained to rescue someone who's caught in a current, versus, some of these early season swims right now, we're hitting, 1,200 CFS, which moving fast down our river. We're not going to put a swim on in that, but rivers change so much, and I think we'll get into this later, but between each year, it's going to depend on how your equipment is, what the river looks like, what the shore looks like, where you can get in and out. Typically on our rivers, we can't drive a vehicle along the course, so we're dependent completely on our inflatable motorized craft. If I had jet skis, I would use them. That'd be really fun, but not just because it's fun. It also serves a purpose.
Because they don't have props.
That's right, because they don't have props. You can have those. They're so versatile. In between your swimmers, I wouldn't say in between, but a lot closer to your swimmers than any hard-shelled boat. But yeah, you're always going to want to have your AEDs if you have them, and I'd suggest getting AED oxygen if you have EMTs or un-EMT there. Possibly one in the boat, depending on how long your swim is, and one on the beach with an action plan that tells where that boat's going to go, exactly where it's going to come up on the shore, so that if you do have an incident, you can get somewhere where you can shock them, as fast as possible, because that's going to make the difference. Let's see, part 2. Oh, I kind of hit that. Where should safety personnel be located? All along the swim. So we have we've done a 2 mile. We typically do a mile and a 500. So we've got someone leading the swim. We've got someone at the back. And what we do is, since we're looping it, and most of our swims are loops, so it's somewhat different than a straight swim, is that we're gonna have people post up at certain buoys and actually do zone coverage, just like a lifeguarded beach. So they're going to have basically towers, which are their rescue boards or their personal watercraft, and they're going to be doing zone coverage as the swimmers pass by. And as they pass by, it's that first wave or first heat goes by, they'll stop at a buoy and then they can watch the other swimmers go through. That's how it's worked well for us in the past. We do have people leading the swims, and once they hit the beach, that first person finishes, they go straight back out and hit the back of that last wave so they can protect the rear. And that last part, what qualifications? So is Mr. Brewster in here? They should all be USLA open water certified lifeguards. I say that, half teasingly. I mean, yeah, ideally, I would love to have every single one of our volunteers, and all our lifeguards are USLA certified. I'm lucky that I wear many different hats, and the swims we get to put on are with the lifeguards that I train. So it's really nice to be able to do that. When you can't do that, I think Jim will go into much greater
You
detail.
can't afford those guards when your agency sponsors the swims, right?
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you can. It is a cost thing. So ideally, you want them trained, and Jim has talked about that earlier. If they can be trained by a lifeguard, if they can have any lifeguarding experience, or given them the training that morning, or ideally, a day or two before. That's incredible. So I think that's it.
Okay, this is going to be a question for Jim, and you heard him this morning, and he's done a lot of things, including a lot of open water swimming. So now you're taking this from a perspective of an open water swimmer. I'm going in the water. I'm going in the water at the Russian River, okay? You know the area, you know me. But say I'm doing this for the first time, what should I be thinking about?
Little fishies. I do have to admit, where I've done your swim, and it was a great swim in the Russian River. I've probably paddled a lot more rivers than I've ever swam. I've done 7 times down the scenic river on the Rio Grande. It's about a 90-mile paddling trip, takes about 6 days. And the amazing thing, going back to the same venue year after year, with changing weather conditions and water feeds and Texas droughts and all that, was how vastly different this river could be from day to day. And even day to day on the river. Or rafting down the American River. My greatest story of rafting ever was going to the American River, South Fork, showing up, spending the night, waking up in the morning, and it was like one of 3 days that summer that they didn't release water from the dam, so there was no rafting that day. So it just kind of depends. As someone who wants to go try a river swim or do a river swim, the first thing I have to go back is, it's kind of like the rescue ability question they asked that the lifeguards asked themselves. It's the same thing. Do I have the ability to do this safely? And I really think that's the big reality check. And sitting in the other room and talking to some triathlon people about, I put on 14 races, and I do clinics before them for free to try and encourage people to understand the venue. I think that's pretty critical. Sorry, I can't see anybody. I think that's pretty critical that you understand that. As far as going in, current, of course, is something is the only difference in my mind between a lake and a river. If it's a big river, is current. There's current there. The other thing I worry about is I really worry about submerged obstacles and bottom changes. You know, I remember jumping off a bridge in college up in Chico to go tubing before college started. Every year we jump off the same bridge, and the one year I went and I didn't look at the bottom before I went in. I landed, I went down 35 feet through the air and hit 6 feet of water. Fortunately, landed on a sandbar. I'm surprised I still have a spine, and I lived through that one. But bottom changes and obstacles and currents and submerged objects. The other thing is, I don't think we've really talked a lot about, but, you know, do you know how to range on an object? You know, I do a lot, if you know me, I do a lot of sailing and sailboat racing, especially out here on the bay where there's 5 knots of current around any given buoy on any given day. And we wouldn't be successful at all in sailboat racing if we didn't know how to range off something off the shore to see which way the current's pushing us. And I don't think we emphasize to new swimmers enough how to range, how to ferry across a current, how to, you know, I'm looking, but I'm swimming this way even though my finish is over there. And this is basic skills to maybe the people in this room. You know, the funny thing about these kind of conferences and clinics is everybody who shows up are the people who are really into it. And the people who aren't here are the ones that really need to be here today. So, you know, how to range and how to ferry. I think flow history is essential. You know, how many cubic feet per second come down that river normally. We're watching it before the race, what you can expect that way. And then I'm going to go back one more time to who's running drag. Drag to me is essential. Who's in the back of that? Who's in the back of that pack? Earlier when we were talking about surveillance and when they were talking about ratios of 1 to 10 or whatever, I kind of go 1 to 10. You know, 800 swimmers around a mile course, that's 80 lifeguards. That's 1 every 7 feet or something. Be nice. 150 people around the same mile course with 1 to 10 is 15 guards. That's about 1 every 100 meters. That's pretty good. But the bottom line becomes, you know, their ability to scan and recognize people in distress. And I have to keep going back to how do you teach people to recognize someone in distress? If you don't know, my other hat, aside from running Rec and Park for the city of San Francisco, is I have an advanced lifeguard training program, and we spend our whole time talking about victim recognition versus, and then we get into response objectives and how fast, you know, do you want to get there, how long. But, you know, I keep going back to you have a couple minutes. You know, everything else is just recovery. You know, so if you don't see them go down and you can't find them and you can't get there, you're in recovery mode in 2 to 3 minutes. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's just the reality of immersion incidents. So being able to spot them and being preventive, in my mind, is critical for anybody who's doing anything in any kind of body of water, watching people. And you understanding that there's 500 swimmers in the water going by you, and you spend the whole race looking at 500 non-events, I call them. Anybody who's swimming is a non-event looking for one event. And you might do that swim, a swim like our Whiskey Town swim, which had an amazing swim, amazing safety records for years. You know, 2 heart attacks 1 year. How are you going to predict that? Who are you going to know? But I want to go back to saying, if you want to swim in a river, know the risk you're taking, know the odds of accidents occurring, and be respectful of that.
Lisa, based on, oh, go
Can I
ahead.
add a little bit to that?
Sure.
Yeah, so the river swims that I did were these marathon swims,
Big
and we
ones.
were in really sketchy situations. I mean, we don't, Russian River, yes, it's a river, but it's
Not
kind of,
really, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a lake that is a river.
Problem, stand up.
Yes, exactly. So, but we, you know, we were in some pretty dicey situations, and you have to realize that if you can, okay, most people, I don't know, I'm just going to say this. If I can swim at 3 miles an hour, and the river's running at 3 miles an hour, we're going 6 miles an hour. And that's really, I mean, it's hard, even if somebody recognized that there was a problem on shore, you're like way down the river by the time they even get in the water. So we were lucky enough to, well, or it was required, that we always had a craft with us because they're going at the same speed as you are, so that they can recognize, and they you know, eyes on you all the time, but they're also scoping out the situation. When you're at water level, you can't see stuff that's even 20 yards down the river, so it was their job to look for you and assess the conditions so that they could steer you away from those obstacles. Because, I mean, I know how hard I've hit a branch when I'm in a lake. And if you're in a river, you're hitting it at twice that speed, and you know, you could get severely cut or whatever. And
it becomes an entrapment hazard at that point.
Yeah.
You know, getting pinned, if you've never been pinned in a raft or in a river playing around, getting pinned is scary.
It
in a
is very
river.
scary.
Scary in a river.
So, and I mean, you know, you can't, hopefully in river races, if they are fast moving enough, they will have a requirement to have, maybe a 1-to-1 craft to swimmer ratio, and other boats out there, so that if, like, we had a race where a lot of the one-on-one craft got separated from their swimmers, and then you got swimmers out there that you can't see because there were no safety cap requirements, but now that we have that, it's so. If you figure that the situation's going to be dangerous, I would prepare in advance to have at least a kayaker with you if they don't require it. What's it going to hurt?
Bring your own.
To bring your own, right?
BYOK. Bring your own kayak.
Okay. That actually was similar to the question I was going to ask.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. David, are river rescues different than ocean or lake rescues?
Yes.
No, thank you. Just as Jim said, yeah, it's observing, it's preventing, it's actually instituting the rescue. If there's a current, if there's a 3-mile-an-hour current, you're not going to approach from down current, because just like you said, if they're going 3 miles an hour up, you're going 3 miles an hour down, then you accidentally hit them. If anybody's ever been hit by a boat or a kayak or whatever, that hurts. So, I mean, other than that, not particularly. Just knowing that your rescue vehicles that are driven are probably not going to have access, or may not have access on that area. So,
You said something really good earlier though. When you talk about swiftwater rescue, swiftwater rescue technology, it's a whole different field from your open water rescue technology or your pool and water park rescue technology. And swiftwater rescue and the use of a throw rope, if you've ever used throw bags and throw ropes in river situations, you're definitely throwing ahead. You're definitely judging current and getting people and locking up on a beach, and the rope does the work and swings them in. And I mean, so there's a lot of different rescue concepts behind moving water for sure. But the reality is, you got to get there quick, or whatever it is.
Okay, I have a question.
I was going to add something to that. I wouldn't necessarily call them rescues, but often river events around New York City require some assistance at the finish. When the current is flowing, while it's great to swim in and you watch the bank go by quickly, it becomes difficult sometimes for people to make the transition to the finish if they don't cut in often enough. And kind of like swimming in the bay here, it's not a river, but yeah. And it could be half the field that overshoots the finish and needs help getting in. So that's I think that requires a lot of planning and a lot of foresight and sometimes cargo nets.
Welcome to San Francisco. Yeah. When you're leaving Alcatraz, really try to hit the entrance into Aquatic Park.
This is based on just what you were talking about. So how do you prepare the swimmers for something like that?
Well, for New York City events, I think all but the shortest entry level events require qualifications, and they can come in the form of submitted pool times, or better yet, an open water event time, which can be confusing if you don't have the entire results of the field to then compare to, because a mile in the open water is never the same in any given event. So I think pool qualification times are helpful. You get to gauge a swimmer's speed, and then you can do a model based on that speed and assign them the proper wave. But certainly open water qualifications, I think, help the directors to better understand the swimmer's experience, which is sometimes more important than their speed, and it gives them a little more to work with, especially if it's a previous event put on by that particular director, where they can then compare you to the rest of the field and assign you more accurately. So.
I have a question for David. This is based on something that's happened this year. we were going to have our open water championship was going to be in an area called Lake Sonoma that Dave's in charge of. And we had an open water events director meeting, and we had Jim speak, and we had the gentleman who was the event director at Whiskeytown where the two gentlemen died. And a few days later, I got a note from David saying, we're going to cancel that swim. And I just would like you to just talk about sort of the reasoning that went behind it, because I think, you know, when you're pulling a swim, and it's a popular swim, because as soon as the swimmers here heard about it, I started getting emails like, why is this happening? So, but from your point of view.
Better you than me?
Yeah.
No, it came down to a logistics issue where we've had trouble with it. It's considered Calistoga, but if anybody's been there, it's Yorty Creek, and it's at Lake Sonoma, and it's not the Lake Sonoma Dam, which is really easy to get to. Everybody knows the dam. It's all the wineries along the way, so as you swim, you can hit those on the way back. But no, this is in an area that it probably takes a good, once you hit Calistoga, which is up north, if you don't know it, off of 101, Cloverdale. You've actually got to take about a half-hour trip up a one-lane, really windy road and drop back down past farmers' gates, and it's a beautiful spot, but it's really steep on either side. We love working with the Army Corps of Engineers who runs that particular reservoir. It's a lake, but yeah, we love working with the Army Corps of Engineers. They're always very hospitable, but they're really low staffed. So we end up putting on the whole event with our staff without very good communication because of the lack of cell phone towers in the area. We have no access to outside emergency medical if we need it. Neither does the ambulance that's there. Yeah, so we've put that in our plan before. If the ambulance leaves or if one doesn't show up or something happens, yeah, we'll have Reach there in 15 minutes, which Reach is our local helicopter service. So, and then it's a 2-mile course. It's actually called Yorty Creek, even though it's an extension of this very vast lake. Every year, depending on the water level, they flooded it in I think 1980, and so there's still tons of trees in there too. So depending on the level, you might snag it. You probably hit the tree at Lake Sonoma. Yeah, okay. So it was a real wake-up call to hear what happened at Whiskeytown, and just briefly that they were able to have an ambulance leave as the other ambulance arrived, so they were totally covered. I mean, if somebody did everything right, that group did, and the worry for us was, even with 10, 12 lifeguards there that are professionally trained, what do we do when we get them out of the water? I mean, we can shock them and we can give them oxygen, but they need drugs, they need paramedics, and they need less than a half-hour ride out of this. The nearest hospital is probably 40 minutes away, or Healdsburg. So you're going to talk about airlift, and then the other issue was, well, they don't airlift heart attacks because they're not stable, so they're not going to risk the chopper. So you're looking at a case where if someone does have a stroke or a heart attack, I mean, we're pretty much signing off on them and saying, you took this into your own hands, where we really want time to think about that and really focus on an emergency action plan that benefits the swimmer. I mean, we're there. The whole reason we're there is for everybody to have a good time, and for, more importantly, for everybody to get out of there safe. So if we can't see how that's going to work out and give them the best possible chance, then it wasn't worth it to us. Is that enough?
I want to open it up to the audience. If you have questions, anybody? And introduce yourself.
Yeah. My name's Simon from the UK. I get involved with swimming training camps, holidays, races. When I think of river swimming, and I think when you ask most people, they probably think of water quality. So, certainly in the UK, you ask most people and they'll say, can't believe you're swimming in that. So, and also in my experience, we have more health issues with river swimming than we do with sea swimming. I suppose lake is related to river swimming. I'd be interested in the panel's opinion on what you should be testing for when you're doing a river swim, and what things, and if there are any standards on that at the moment. And I think from earlier on today there probably aren't, but I'd be interested in what you test for at the moment.
I can answer.
We'll just pass it down.
Okay.
So I went to Argentina and Brazil 3 times for these marathon swims, and each time I went to my local hospital and I said, I'm going here, I'm going to swim in this water. What do I need to get vaccinated against? And every single time I had to get shots. And the first year I got very, very sick, so much so that I almost didn't do the second race, and I tried, but that was a disaster. Take ciprofloxacin is something that you can take sort of prophylactically before, or I had it afterwards when I started to feel sick, and it sort of cut it off at the pass. But definitely any urgent care facility, or just go to your GP. I don't know what kind of medical care y'all have, but they will have a list of known problems in any area that you go to swim in. So it was very sketchy where we were going, and the water was like far worse than anything you'd ever see in the United States. So I made sure to get vaccinated. Hepatitis being the biggest thing to vaccinate against.
What about testing? 'Cause that's what you were asking about.
Well, yeah. I think someone alluded to earlier today that unfortunately, if you want to do an E. coli test on a body of water, you got to send it to a lab, and it takes like 72 hours because they got to get the culture to grow, right? They got to give it a substrate and see what comes up. I know not from the river and lake point of view, but as an aquatic operator for 20, 30 years now, we really have concentrated on recreational waterborne illnesses in the United States recently. So anything from Giardia to Cryptosporidium, which is really kind of the worst. This is an oomycete that is chlorine resistant up to 20 parts per million for 24 hours. I mean, I think that if anything were to warrant investigation by the body, I think water quality is one of the biggest things. And I'm interested to hear from the guy from New York, because I've heard stories about people swimming into flotsam and jetsam in the Manhattan River that has a pulse. So maybe you want to comment a little bit, or somebody from there.
Well, if it has a pulse, it's not really an issue. They've done much to improve water quality in and around New York. However, they still have a mixed treatment system, or a mixed sewer system that becomes overwhelmed when there's rain. If there's heavy rain, I think more than 1/4 inch per hour, you have to assume some level of compromise. And personally, I maintain tetanus, hepatitis A, and if I really suspect the water to be compromised, I'll take Cipro prophylactically. It has helped. I have suffered with a terrible sinus staph infection in Hawaii, of all places. It's not fun. But a lot of the smaller municipalities upriver don't have the same high-quality sewage treatment that Manhattan has. And often around Manhattan, the cleanest water is what has been tested right outside the large sewage treatment plant at Riverside. So a little bit of irony there, or not. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that as was mentioned before, that test results are that readily available that race directors can really benefit from that information. But I think there's some responsibility in warning the participants or likely participants that there's the possibility that they're going to be swimming through stuff other than water. So.
Yeah. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, I don't even have to make this up, do I? Exactly. There's a whole lot of answers that have come out, and the way that we approach this, my name is Jim Miller, by the way. I sit on the FINA Sports Medicine Committee and oversee a lot of these races. And we are establishing standards under which all of the FINA organized races are conducted. And the way that we do water quality there is you have to have 2 samples into and tested by within 2 weeks of the event, turned into the medical officer in charge of that event. We also require a water qualities measurement to be done on the day of the event. Now, you can say, well, that's kind of like the horse is out of the barn. And that's certainly true. However, if an event were to occur, I can at least tell the athletes on that specific day, this is what you were exposed to. So I can at least give them some information as to what they really did come across. The next step in this whole thing is standardization. So I take a water sample out of Cancun, and I take a water sample out of Nigeria, and I take a water sample out of San Francisco Harbor. Under what standards are those measured to be adequate for athletes to participate in? And as you would guess, everybody has different standards. So the next step, and the step that I proposed to the FINA Bureau right now, is to accept the WHO standards. Now, are the WHO standards the same standard as San Francisco and Long Beach use? And the answer is no, it's not. But it's a heck of a lot better than what some of the other folks are using. And at least it is a standard that you can say that it meets this standard, which is an internationally recognized standard. So certainly far better than what we currently have. And holding those organizations to that standard. The second piece that comes into this is understanding the body of water. So we had a World Cup event around Governor's Island that I was in charge of 2 years ago. And we actually did the surveys that you're alluding to. And actually in New York City, the level of purification of the water is such that it can withstand 3/4 of an inch per hour for 12 hours without having any compromise to the quality of water. They've done an incredible job with cleaning up that city. So understanding that, we had, and they have measurements that go back like 20 years in all these different sites. So you measure the place, they start measuring it 2 weeks in advance, they have all this data and so forth, and all that's made available to the athletes and their technical committees and their coaches and so forth on the technical meeting that's held before the events. So that's what we're doing on an international standard, and that's where we're heading on the international standard. Is it perfect? And the answer is of course not. You then get into the question of where do you measure? Well, in a small circular course, you can measure probably almost any place. On a linear course, do you measure where every single river dumps out into that body of water? Do you just measure the middle? Do you measure the end? Do you measure where all the feeding stations are? I mean, you really get into some very complex situations that are course by course dependent, understanding that courses change year to year. So that's probably far more answer than you ever wanted to hear. But that's what we're interacting with on an international basis right now. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, all right, go ahead.
I have a quick question do you have to go to like a certified lab for those, or?
You have to go to a certified lab in the country. That's the hitch. Now, the certified lab from here, I mean, you can get back to, unless there's rush hour, you can get back to and from within 45 minutes. If I'm sitting in Sumidara Canyon, it's 3 days. Problem. Almost all labs, government-run labs, are not open on weekends. When are your races being held? On weekends. So do you just hold it in your pocket, turn it over on Monday? I mean, there's some really logistic things that we have to think about. And we hold these meet directors to some pretty uncomfortable standards sometimes. But one of the things we're working toward is having the same standard regardless of where you are in the world. And we may find events that just can't happen.
Does it have to be sent to a certified lab, like a government certified lab, or can it be?
Do you think the certification of a laboratory is the same in all 102 federations within the FINA governance?
No, absolutely not.
Right. It has to be certified by that country. What does that mean? That's where we get in trouble.
So Jim, if you can't get a water certified,
I call the event.
well, that's what I said. Why? Then how can you have a certificate?
Yeah, I mean, you do. I mean, and then the question is, what's the standard for them? And they have problems too. I mean, can they get it to the event and back in time in a timely fashion? And those are problematic. But we do have the capability now that if we do not have those types of standards, that we can call an event if there's suspicion. And can you determine the clarity of the water by just looking at it? Of course not. I mean, of course not.
Got time? We've got time for maybe about one or two more questions. Yeah.
For Jim. Question about
Sorry.
what do you look for? I mean, there's almost an infinite.
The question was, what do you look for? And in saltwater, there's specific bacteria that you look for, which are called indices bacteria, which are likely to measure to be markers that other things are there. Do you test for every bacteria known to man? The answer is, of course, not.
I got a question. Like the incident that happened in the Gulf, where they got that big oil spill, they got dispersants they're putting in the water to help with the spill. I don't know what these dispersants are about, but perhaps they're not good for you either. And if you're looking at analyzing the water and you're not looking for that dispersant that perhaps is bad for you, then you're missing the mark. So my question really is, what besides bacteria, there's lots of other compositions of the water that could be, a swimmer might want to know about, exposing themselves to.
It's very broad. I got a phone call from a U.S. team physician one time that what does he do in Australia because they're swimming in a heated lake. And I went, excuse me, where are you? And I said, just turn around. This was, I can pick on this discipline. This was an orthopedic surgeon, so I could pick on him. And there was a coning tower. They were swimming in a nuclear lake. And I said, go find cold water. Get out of there. Yeah.
Okay. Can we have a question that maybe is on a bit different topic?
For you.
I've been hearing a lot of stuff this morning, and this has really been eye-opening, but I'm just wondering, is USMS, and maybe Jim could stay and answer this, or or other people that are involved in a lot of the organizations that are represented here, it sounds like, first and foremost, we almost need to come up with a criteria for how to hold an open water event. Like, I applaud Dave for saying, we can't hold a safe event at this venue. And I just think that almost should be something that we need to consider. It's not looking at how we can make the venue safe, it's if the venue is safe.
One more question. Anybody back here? Sure.
Yeah, let Jim.
I think your question, Phyllis, is why we're here. Because I think there's a lot of criteria for what a lot of different people have a lot of different opinions upon what's a safe event. In Northern California, we've spent a lot of time the last 20 years. So, to us, when you say we're going to mandate sanctioning events and have safety checklists and guidelines and procedures to follow to have a good, safe event, we don't cringe because we've self-imposed that for 20 years now. A lot of our races don't think twice about having to have an ambulance on site. Yet other people tell me that's going to break their race. They can't do it. So I think we're there. I think the fact that the board of directors of United States Masters Swimming in January decided that they were going to actually try to look at best practices and safety guidelines for swim meets and open water swimming is leading us down the road where we want to go. So I think you're going to see that. And I applaud the organization for taking a stand to say, well, maybe we should have some safety guidelines instead of if we don't have them, we'll never be held accountable for something going wrong. Well, everybody knows that there's inherent risk in swimming. So these guidelines coming and these procedures coming and these sanctioning processes coming and things to make events safer for the athletes is going to provide finally the ultimate athlete protection that we're looking for. So I think you're going to see that. Shelley,
yeah, Shelley.
Excuse my ignorance, because I've swum in most of the races. So I swam around Manhattan nearly 10 times. So I understand the islands and the rivers. My question is to all of you, are all the events have to go through a body, a particular governing body that says this, we will sanction this event? Because I know that in Australia we have events happening that their own organisation has a power unto themselves, and I'm wondering whether that. I just want to know if that is the case in not US Master Swimming or US Swimming, or does every open water swimming competition, does it have to be? I hear USLA doing a great job on the water, but what about the actual association itself?
Well, I know for here, and we're Pack Masters as part of U.S. Masters Swimming. And every year out in January, I send out an application and a whole sanction packet that tells all the event directors what it is they have to do. And all that material comes back to me. I check it over, we fine tune it, and then I assign them a sanction number. And there are some swims that are not invited back if they have it, and because afterwards we go in with an evaluation. And last year there were some swims that didn't get their sanctioned performance bond back because of really poor performance. So that's done here. And Lynn, you want to talk about, I'm assuming it's the same with the rest of USMS.
The rest of USMS is somewhat behind Pacific Masters. And some do have evaluations, others don't. Some just have a sanctions chair that looks at it themselves. So it's really what we're trying to do in Masters is have a more uniform process across the country. And we just started implementing that with Glenda as the coordinator.
But can you talk about what's in the sanction process?
Oh, okay.
I think the real issue is if you wonder what we're doing, I think if you told them, here's the 9 or 12 or 15, I don't even remember because it was 5 years ago, these are the things that are included. But,
right, yeah, there's a whole checklist. Bill, you just did yours. Right. Do you want to go through what you did?
I can talk a little bit about it because I don't have it done.
Well, that's all right. That's all right.
But of course, what we have two different things in our packet. One is a detailed event plan. It starts with a timeline at 6 o'clock of what my team is going to do, opening the race, setting it up, how that's going to go, how we're going to work with our Nick Shriver's the East Bay Parks coordinator, so his lifeguard team. We do definitely have a medical emergency plan. We have an evacuation plan, what to do in the event of weather. There's course maps. There's information about where the closest hospital is, the contact numbers for them, the numbers for the guard station, the telephone number that's there, so that we know we don't have cell phone coverage at that lake either, but we do know we have ways to communicate. We always have a standby ambulance on premise, and in our case, it's very good to work with our East Bay Parks because I do know that the team of people that he has working the race that day is trained at a very specific level. They know what to do. They carry radios. Their communication plan is quite extensive, and they have a coordinator that's our safety coordinator. But once it's race day and on the water, I rely totally on that team. We have a few kayaks that help guide. But our sanctioning process spells all those things out, and we do include that in the packet that we submit to Glenda.
All right, is there anybody here from other swims? You can talk about sanctioning? Okay.
I think the question was more specifically, is there a standard sanctioning body that's required? I know the Coast Guard doesn't require a sanction to approve a marine event permit. So
jurisdiction over half of the waters anyway.
Well, around New York, they.
Oh, yeah, but
the New York City Swim is not beholden to USMS or FINA, except for the specific pro events.
Who has the final say on whether you can stage an event or not?
No one. Well, it depends where it is. I think the answer to that is it depends where it is.
Is that not a concern for you? Considering why we're here?
One at a time.
The event I'm trying to put on requires marine event permits from the Coast Guard.
We've just about run, in fact, we're over. So all I wanted to do is go back to the panel, ask them, each of you, thinking about river swims and safety, what's the one thing you want this audience to leave with? Make it real short.
Lightning won't strike a narrow body of water if the banks are high.
See, here comes the real stuff. We waited for the hour.
Gosh, just yeah, plan ahead. Think safety, I guess. It's not very unique, but that's what it is.
If you haven't done the race before, stay in the middle, because that's always going to be the deepest. Well,
everything in the river flows downstream.